6,000 years ago, a man sat still while another human drilled into his living tooth with a rock. No anesthesia, no numbing, just a sharpened flint point spun by hand or bow drill, grinding down through enamel into raw, exposed nerve. Archaeologists found the skeleton in Pakistan, part of a Neolithic graveyard with 9 drilled teeth among several skulls. The holes were too clean to be decay, too precise to be accident. Someone did this on purpose. And somehow, the patient survived long enough for the wound to heal. That's the part that should unsettle you, not the pain, the fact that it worked. Think about what that actually required. Someone had to hold a sharpened point steady against living bone while a second person spun it over and over, grinding deeper with every rotation. The patient felt every second of it. There was no way to dull that pain, no plant, no potion, nothing strong enough to make the drilling bearable. And yet the wound in that ancient jaw shows signs of healing, which means the person didn't just survive the procedure, they lived long enough afterward for their body to close the gap. Somebody, 6,000 years before the invention of anesthesia, correctly diagnosed a dental problem and treated it with startling precision. Tooth decay is not a modern problem. It's one of the oldest enemies the human body has ever had, and for most of our history, we fought it with almost nothing. No germ theory, no antibiotics, no idea that bacteria even existed. Just trial, error, and an instinct that something inside the mouth had gone wrong and needed to come out. Before agriculture, cavities were rare. Hunter-gatherer diets were low in sugar and starch, and teeth wore down naturally from grit and fiber, which kept bacteria from settling into deep grooves. Then humans started farming grain. Softer food, more sugar, more carbohydrate stuck between teeth, feeding bacteria that produced acid, and that acid ate straight through enamel. Skeletal records show the shift almost like a switch flipping. Agricultural populations have dramatically higher rates of cavities than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. We traded a stable food supply for a mouthful of new enemies. And once a cavity broke through into the pulp of a tooth, there was no stopping it. Infection did not stay contained. It spread into the jaw, then the surrounding tissue, then sometimes into the bloodstream. Before the 20th century, a dental abscess could be a death sentence. Doctors have found ancient skulls with jawbones eaten through by infection, sometimes with visible drainage channels where the body tried and failed to fight it off. A toothache wasn't an inconvenience. It could be the beginning of the end. There's a reason people feared it so much. An untreated abscess doesn't just sit quietly inside the jaw. The pressure builds as pus has nowhere to go, swelling the face, cutting off the ability to eat or sleep. In the worst cases, the infection tracks downward into the neck and throat, swelling the airway shut. Historical records from well into the 1800s describe people dying from what started as a simple cavity, the infection traveling to the brain or the bloodstream before anyone understood what was actually killing them. George Washington himself struggled with dental infections for most of his adult life, and some historians believe the resulting abscesses contributed to the illness that eventually killed him. If a president with access to the best care of his era could be brought down by a rotting tooth, imagine what it meant for everyone else. So people intervened however they could. In ancient Egypt, physicians described tooth pain and gum disease in medical papyri, prescribing pastes made from ground herbs, honey, and minerals, packed directly into the cavity. Some mixtures likely had mild antibacterial properties purely by accident of ingredient. They didn't know why it sometimes helped. They just knew that doing nothing was worse. In ancient China, acupuncture was used specifically to treat tooth pain, with needles placed to disrupt the nerve signal instead of the source of the infection. It didn't cure anything. It just bought time, dulling agony long enough for a person to eat, or sleep, or simply stop screaming. The Romans went further. A physician named Archigenes described drilling into an aching tooth to relieve pressure from infection. Almost identical in logic to a modern root canal, just without any way to clean or seal what was left behind. And in medieval Europe, when infection or decay became unbearable, the answer was usually the same. Pull it. Barbers, blacksmiths, even traveling tooth drawers performed extractions with iron pelicans and forceps, tools that looked more suited to farm work than medicine. There was no sedation beyond alcohol, and sometimes not even that. Patients were held down by assistants or strapped to a chair while the tool gripped the tooth and simply wrenched it free of the jawbone. Infection could follow the extraction just as easily as it followed the decay. Sometimes the cure carried its own death sentence. Traveling tooth drawers often performed extractions in public, in market squares, partly for practical reasons and partly as advertising. A screaming patient and a bloody tooth held aloft was proof the practitioner could do the job. Some operators built entire reputations around speed, since a faster extraction meant less time for the patient to struggle or change their mind. Without any concept of sterilization, the same instruments were used again and again, carrying infection from one mouth to the next. The line between healer and hazard was thinner than most patients realized, and choosing the wrong tooth drawer could turn a bad toothache into a fatal one. Some cultures tried prevention instead of cure. In ancient India, chew sticks made from neem branches were used daily, and neem does have natural antibacterial compounds, so this wasn't superstition. It was function without the science to explain it. In multiple ancient societies, from Egypt to Rome, people used crude toothpaste-like pastes made from crushed pumice, ash, or eggshell, scrubbed onto teeth with fingers or cloth. Abrasive, sometimes painfully so, but it worked exactly the way modern toothpaste works, physically scraping bacteria and residue off the enamel before it could do damage. By the time we reached the Middle Ages, dental problems had become so common that toothworm theory dominated medical thinking across cultures. The belief that a literal worm burrowed inside the tooth and caused the pain, which was treated by fumigating the mouth with smoke, meant to drive the worm out. The theory persisted for an astonishingly long time, showing up in medical texts across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, independently invented by cultures with no contact with each other. It wasn't until centuries later that anyone connected the dots between sugar, bacteria, and acid. For most of human history, we were fighting an enemy we couldn't even correctly identify, treating a microscopic bacterial process as though it were a visible, physical creature burrowing through bone, which makes that Neolithic dental drilling even more remarkable. Whoever performed those procedures had no concept of bacteria, no understanding of infection at a biological level, and yet they identified the correct treatment anyway. Remove the damaged material, relieve the pressure, give the body a chance to heal around the wound. It was crude. It was almost certainly agonizing, but it worked well enough, often enough, that people kept doing it for thousands of years, across cultures that never had contact with each other. Modern dentistry didn't invent the idea of treating tooth decay. It just finally gave us the tools to do it without holding someone down first. Novocaine, sterilization, and antibiotics are barely a century old. For every century before that, across every continent, humans faced the exact same problem with nothing but flint, iron, and guesswork, and somehow kept finding solutions that worked well enough to pass down. Next time you sit in a dental chair, mildly annoyed about a filling, remember what came before it. Remember the flint drill, the iron pelican, the fumigating smoke meant to chase out a worm that was never there. Remember the market square extractions, the packed herbal pastes, the neem branch chewed every morning by someone who had no idea why it worked, only that it did. Somewhere behind every modern dental tool is 6,000 years of humans staring down the same rotting pain, refusing to just let it win.